This is WNUT Talk on the WNUT Radio Network. You are listening to WNUT Talk here on the WNUT Radio Network. You might be listening on Live 365, where we stream 24 hours a day. If so, hey, thank you. If you're not doing that, you should go to live365.com or download the free Live 365 app and just search WNUT. We come right up. Also, you could be listening to this at anywhere you like to find your podcast. Spotify, Apple, Amazon, any of those places. YouTube, for God's sake. And, you know, hey, if you favor one, go check out the other. I appreciate the numbers and the push and everything. I always say when I end this show, hey, join us next time when the topic is going to be, who knows, because I usually never do. Well, today I'm on location in Queens in beautiful New York City with somebody who is going to help me tell today's story to you. We are going to kind of present the topic today together, and she has got a hell of a story to tell you, and it's staggering. It is a confounding story. It is heartbreaking, and it's outrageous, and it sounds like something that a Hollywood writer continually architected the twists and the turns of. You're going to wonder how a story like this could happen, but I assure you, it is true, and you can go and look up the articles and the legal filings on your own and verify it yourself. So without further ado, let me just introduce Rachel Waters. How are you?
I am doing okay. Much better than I was this time last year.
I know. It has been just about a full year. Yeah. I think 5 days.
Yep. In about 5 days.
A year and 5 days. Rachel and I go back, way back. We were just before we started recording, trying to figure out how far back. I know we go back at least formally to Augusta State University.
Yeah, which was about 24 years ago.
Yeah, and taking some classes in journalism and being in the communications program there.
That's right.
So, yeah, we go back 2X years. We don't know how many.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the mid-20s.
long time. And, there were times where I would be working on creative projects of either film or still photography and things like that. And you always were willing to help me out and be a part of those things. Talk a little bit about your life and your career, the things you've done throughout the years. You've been a model. You've been so many things.
Yeah. I think it's funny because when you met me, it was really building upon this lifelong love of storytelling and writing and a really intense curiosity that I had about the world. So, when I went into ASU, I always knew that I was probably going to go into journalism because I liked learning more and telling stories that were true. Mm-hmm. And that curiosity, though, that also sort of branched out into me exploring a whole host of other things. As you know, I was really active in the subculture music scene. I was a little goth kid. And when you mentioned the modeling, I had, this very distinctive sense of style that was not really common where we were from in Augusta. And I was sort of one of the pioneering members of the goth scene. My ex-husband and I started Augusta's first goth night there.
Spectral Erosa,
Spectral Erosa, yeah. That's right. Way back, I think in 2004, 2003. It was, ridiculously long time ago. But that got me into modeling because a lot of other artists are drawn to that. They want to shoot, they want you to act, and I was always game to create art with people. Yeah. And you were definitely one of those people. Like if you were cool and not creepy and on the level, I enjoyed making things as much as I enjoyed telling stories. I loved helping other people tell their stories too.
Boy, I had some bizarre ideas back in the day.
Oh, great.
And you always were down. You never scoffed at any of the crazy shit that I came up with. You never at any point said, "Why the hell are you wasting your time with this?" Or, this is stupid. You always were so game to just, be crazy with us. And everybody who met you and got to be a part of all those things always really just loved your energy and was a fan of the experience. So,
oh, man, that means a lot to me.
So thank you for just, being a part of some of that stuff. And I appreciate that more than you know. I also appreciate you being willing to tell your story here and to talk about the things that have happened to you in the past several years.
Yeah.
And I know it's not an easy thing to talk about.
No.
I know I said in the intro that this story sounds like it was written by a Hollywood screenwriter. I kind of watched it unfold in real time on social media throughout the years.
What I could say.
Right.
Yeah, I suddenly got real quiet for a period there.
and we'll get into why that might have needed to happen.
Yeah.
I haven't even hinted so far at the story. I'll go ahead and say this part so that people understand where we're headed. But there's so much that comes before and after what I'm about to say. You were indicted last year for the murder of your mother.
That's right.
Charged with killing your own mother. The charges were malice murder and felony murder.
That's right.
Yet you sit here before me. So, like I said, there's a lot to talk about before and after these charges. Thank you so much for being willing to sit and talk about this today.
Yeah.
So, this could happen to anybody who is caring for a loved one in declining health.
Yeah.
This is not something that had ever happened before.
It is not.
At least that I could find any record of somebody who was charged for the murder of someone who was actively in the process of dying.
That's right. I'm the first in history as far as we're aware.
People may be asking, how in the hell could that possibly happen to them? It's hard to figure out where to begin laying out a story like this. So let's start with what you describe as your curse. You've often said through the years.
Yeah.
I think you've described it as blurst.
Yes.
But your life seems to put you in the pathway of a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Talk about your curse a little bit.
You know, it's funny. That's a thing that I have spent many years both talking about in therapy as well as with, the people who are closest to me, like my husband. Mm-hmm. I often say, yes, I'm both blessed and cursed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I've described it as incredibly good and incredibly bad luck. Yeah. I think it is a combination of factors that contributes to that. I think one of them is just the nature of being an extrovert, because by going out into the world and interacting with a lot of people, you end up in a lot of situations that put you in the path of great fortune.
Right.
Also sometimes misfortune.
You aren't shying away from new experiences, new people.
That's right. As someone who learned about a decade ago now that I'm on the autism spectrum, I sort of have an interesting way of processing and interacting with the world. So the ways that maybe a neurotypical person would react to a situation or interact with the world is different. But I'm often someone who acts, who doesn't hesitate to act in situations because I don't have some of the same social barriers.
And, I don't want you to go into your curse in any way to minimize the emotional importance of the story that you're going to tell here. That's, we'll start to see the pattern of this curse. Introduce itself into the story as it unfolds. And so I kind of wanted you to speak to that a little bit. Yeah. So I'd like you to start by telling the listener a little bit about your mother. Introduce us to Marsha Foster.
My mom was great. I feel like it's a common narrative to talk about all the issues that our parents had. And my mom certainly had her own issues. Right.
It's a trope to have that conflict.
It is a trope. But at the end of the day, people are still complicated human beings who are trying this thing for the first time and not always getting it right. So I feel like some of this is going to be important because my mom had a personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And I think that created an underlying narrative throughout the course of her life and her care that might have played a negative role in how she was perceived, and by extension, me and anyone around her. So my mom had a lot of volatile emotions that I don't think she really knew what to do with. And that became uncontrolled after the dementia. But before dementia, the way to describe my mom is she was a very intense and emotional person, but she was also profoundly loving. Yeah. In my life, I was one of those kids who had the great privilege of never doubting how much my mom loved and cared for me and would fight tooth and nail to defend me. And if you're like a little weird autistic kid growing up, that's everything. Like, I used to be accused of plagiarism on my papers because I wrote ahead of my level. And my mom would, when I was in elementary school and middle school, talk to them and ask like, hey, can you do a timed test where you like watch her write a thing so she can show she can write like this? She even suggested.
She'd get in there and advocate for you.
She would advocate for me, and she would teach me how to advocate for myself too, which was incredible. She was also super literary. We grew up reading each other books and poetry and creating art together. She was a painter. I draw. I also paint. She taught me how to paint. That was one of her last gifts to me.
I always got the sense when you would post through the years just how close the two of you were.
Oh, yeah.
Every picture, the two of you seemed so very happy.
I adored my mom.
Yeah.
And she had a really solid moral and ethical compass. And she imbued that in me from a young age, as well as compassion and love for other people. And I carry so much of that part of her in myself too, that, there's no way I could be anything grateful for having the mom that I did.
What was the timeline of her cancer diagnosis and the Alzheimer's that began to set in?
The Alzheimer's came first, and it was almost shockingly sudden. In 2019, holidays 2019, I was down in Georgia with my mom for the holidays, as always. Spent every Thanksgiving and Christmas at mom's in Georgia. She did have a weird speech blip that I had started to notice, which was she would reverse pronouns a lot. So she would talk about her old cat Wednesdays. She would call her a he sometimes, and she would call she's he's. And that kind of it got me a little anxious because we had a 23andMe test years prior that showed that we had the ApoE4 Alzheimer's gene. And so I knew it was a risk. However, my mom did not fit any of the other profiles. She'd been healthy all her life. She worked a rigorous, intellectual job. When she was working, she was still actively painting and reading and writing. And so it kind of seemed like a far off possibility even then. But still, it kind of sticks in your mind. It's something to keep an eye on over the years. I was medically knowledgeable. My husband at the time's a geneticist. He was not yet focused on Alzheimer's, but he knew enough to be like, well, this is going to be a far off thing that you won't really have to worry about anytime soon.
Right.
Well, I leave in early January 2020 with plans for my mom and I to get back together for her birthday, which was March 18th of 2020. Guess what happened just before March 18th of 2020?
Everything shuts down.
So
you're not able to probably travel very easily or get back to her.
No, you can't travel at all.
Right.
We were fully locked down in New York.
Oh, okay.
And sometime around early midsummer, I noticed her text messages were getting increasingly garbled and odd, which for someone who used to be an English teacher and who had the immaculate vocabulary in English that she did, I began to suspect that something was seriously going off the rails. And so I made plans to get down to her as soon as I possibly could, which turned out to be in late August, early September of 2020. That was the first time we could really travel.
How long had you lived in New York City by then?
I had already lived here. Oh my God. I moved here in 2012. So I had been here for 8 years.
And so now we start a pattern where you've got to try and find out how often you can get down there.
That's
just to assess kind of what's going on with her.
That's right.
And be as present as you can for new developments.
Yep. And so we got down there, and when I arrived, I was shocked because she had aged 20 years and 8 months. She had lost a good 20 pounds of weight,
Wow.
and her spinal column had completely collapsed. She was doubled over now.
Wow.
From severe osteoporosis, and what we didn't know at the time was the bone lesions, which were the early precursor to her multiple myeloma, which made the bone deterioration far more severe than it would have been.
All of this just in how many months? From invisible symptoms to...
From invisible in January to full-blown by August.
By August.
And at that point, it's kind of panic mode. It's calling family members, her siblings, to talk to them about, hey, I think she has developed Alzheimer's, or at least the early stages. Because speaking to her, she was in terrible pain all the time too. So because of this collapsed spine, which I didn't know about, by the way, till I got there.
Yeah.
So I call the family, and immediately they kind of dismiss my concerns. They're like, she's always been kind of, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. This is nothing. And I realized I'm not really going to get much help from them at the time.
Right.
Whether they're in denial because they're also getting older and don't want to face it, or it's already a stressful time with the pandemic, it became clear to me that it was on me to figure this out. And so I got her into a gerontologist who specializes in all diseases of aging, right? So not just Alzheimer's, but also things like osteoporosis, which she clearly had. She does a cognitive test, and she says, okay, we're right at the mild cognitive impairment stage, but yes, I do think she's on the way to Alzheimer's. But you probably have years, because this is a slow progressing disease. Let's treat the osteoporosis, kind of relieve some of the pain, and we should be good for a time. You should have years of being able to plan this and get everything in order. And so we get her treatment with Reclast for her osteoporosis, also get her on some hormone therapy, and her bones do start responding. Some of it stabilizes. And she seems like she might be all right for like the next, almost 6 months to a year. The cognitive decline doesn't seem that rapid.
And so this has taken us into late summer 2021.
Yeah, we're starting to get into 2021. But between 2021 and 2022, she starts experiencing really rapid accelerations in cognitive decline. And I notice her spine looks like it's collapsing even more. And this is when we start getting more in-home assistance with me coming down really frequently.
I remember you having to figure out how to make 800-mile one-way trips.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
On a regular basis.
Yep. I was going down every 6 to 8 weeks at that point, staying a week or two at a time. She was starting to get some physical therapy and some assistance in-home. But they're, Medicare doesn't cover activities of daily living like cooking and medications. So my aunt was starting to take care of some of that stuff when I wasn't down. But there was like this increasing sense of resentment of like, well, why can't you fix this? And yet at the same time, when I would try to get her on medications for Alzheimer's and things that might slow her progression, my family would respond with extreme suspicion of the medications. They would read about the side effects and say, I'm not going to cooperate or participate in her care if you get her on these medications.
So it was side effects they were concerned about? What if this should do something?
They were like, oh my God, I hear suicidal ideation as a side effect. So if you put her on this, we will no longer help out. Was basically what. So
they were trading the potential for a side effect like that to complicate her life for this progression of the natural.
They didn't seem to understand it. That even though I explained it, there was very little trust of my or my husband's medical knowledge. Okay. They didn't even trust the doctors that we took her to because they didn't belong to the right hospital system. Had
they always been distrusting of you just naturally, or was it tied specifically to your mom's condition?
Yes. They did. It is in retrospect, being kind of, again, the autism, family members tell you they love you and you believe that. But in retrospect, I look back at how much suspicion there was about who I was in my life. Like they were very religious, very evangelical. And I declared myself a Buddhist when I was 11. I married someone they didn't approve of. I moved to New York, which they saw as sort of the center of Zen. They certainly didn't approve of my being polyamorous and having 2 partners either. Right. So that was just another nail in the coffin of, we don't trust this person. Yeah. And it made her care incredibly hard. But what really just sent everything to hell in a handbasket was in June, or actually it was July of 2022, exactly 1 year before her death. That was when she got the diagnosis of multiple myeloma. And after her death, we found she had brain lesions from it too. So it was a combination of Alzheimer's, brain lesions from multiple myeloma, as well as it looks like she had some vascular dementia in addition.
I remember reading how much of the medical records and her history you got a hold of.
I did.
And organized all these files and got a sense of everything that you didn't necessarily know about when you were in the thick of it and going through it, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. How do you go into that final year?
Oh, man.
How do you come up with an approach to tackle what you now have in front of you?
It was drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
One of the first things I realized is, her care needs and cost are going to advance far beyond my means. And so I knew that I needed to find a way to put one of the homes that she had intended for me to inherit after her death on the market to pay for this care. Because elder care cost, especially with someone with really complex medical needs, like Alzheimer's, they are astronomical.
Oh, yeah.
They are well into the 6 figures.
That is
and that's with good insurance.
People. Yeah.
Right? So I began to make plans to put her home on the market. That creates another point of tension with the family who sees it as me trying to get my inheritance early. And so whatever distrust they had is now even deeper.
Yeah.
This is the only way I can afford to have in-home care for her and stick to my promise of keeping her in home as long as possible.
These people who are objecting to these things and giving you this friction, to what degree are they stepping up and helping with this care?
Well, it's mostly my aunt. My uncle was largely hands-off. He would come and see my mom every now and then. But my aunt would see my mom every day for about an hour or so. She would only take her to appointments if I purchased a car for her to drive her, because she refused to have my mom in her car because my mom once threw water on her and she said she's going to ruin my vehicle. Because the most important thing for me, no matter how much they interfered, was I knew that the social contact mom got from them was invaluable, because she didn't know this tension was happening. And I knew she was very likely entering her final years of life. At that point, I was optimistic, but you have to be prepared for the future. And unfortunately, by December of 2022, which is, less than 6 months after her diagnosis, she fails her monoclonal antibody therapy. She is, of course, not remotely physically or cognitively resilient enough for chemo. And that's when her oncologist says, we need to go on hospice. I think that's the best option for her, which is home hospice, right? That is something that around 75 million Americans rely on, is Medicare home hospice. And we don't tend to have a lot of knowledge of how home hospice works unless we've directly experienced it ourselves. The way home hospice is administered across the country, the commonality they have is they'll set you up with a hospital bed if you need it, toilet risers if you need it, oxygen if you need it. Depends, which, is great. They can even have someone come by like once or twice a week for bathing or showering. Definitely worth taking that service, but that's kind of it.
Right.
The other thing that is sort of universal across hospice is something called a comfort care kit, also known as an emergency kit.
Yes. As I was reading your posts and the conversations that you've had on sites like Reddit and things like that over the course of the last year, I became aware of how few people really know what a comfort care kit is. Why don't you tell the people listening what that entails, what that's for?
Yep.
And you take that one.
So a comfort care kit is given to family members or caregivers that the family has hired. And these are medications, some of which are controlled substances, including sublingual, which is under the tongue, morphine, lorazepam or other benzodiazepines, as well as suppositories and other medications that are designed to ease comfort and respiratory distress at end of life, especially in the event of you being unable to get a hospice nurse there at 3 o'clock in the morning and your loved one is dying with agonal breathing. People are prescribed these kits, and then they are trained by hospice on how to use them. How that training looks varies across the board, but basically you are deputized. Even though you're not a healthcare provider yourself, you are deputized to administer these controlled substances to your loved one, even if there is not a medical professional there to oversee it.
Does your name appear on any of the documentation for the prescription or anything?
No.
That is going to, I have a feeling that's going to come into play.
That's a hugely important thing.
Yeah. You posted a picture of a prescribed comfort care kit.
That's right. Dated,
it was filled on the 12th of December, 2022.
When she went into hospice.
CVS in Grovetown, Georgia. There was a dosage written on it. It was, the instructions for administering the dosages. You gave her this as prescribed, as it was prescribed for that express purpose for you to give to her.
As I was trained.
Yes.
And you don't think anything of it, right? Because you assume that there is some document of you having been deputized. You would assume if I'm being given this controlled substance and told to use it with my loved one, then of course it's going to be common knowledge. It's going to be understood. So you don't ever think of yourself as potentially being in jeopardy. Yeah. And there's also an understanding that your loved one is going to die because they're in hospice.
And hospice did sit with you after this kit came home, and they went over all of this information
They
with
did.
you.
And sometimes they don't, though. Sometimes you just pick it up and you have the instructions and a number to call. I've talked to many people whose loved ones have gone to hospice. It varies wildly across the board. But it is standard practice with hospice companies. So the important thing to keep in mind is we're given this kit. It's at home. We used it as needed as it was prescribed and let hospice know about it. And so we didn't think anything of this even when my mom had to move ultimately into memory care. And this is in March of 2023. It was no longer safe for her to be at home. So she moves into a memory care facility, Marshall Pines in Evans, Georgia. And this is considered a residence. It is not considered a medical facility, which is really important. This is basically a place where I'm paying her rent as well as paying for professionals who are caregivers. They had a nurse on staff during regular business hours, but this is not a medical facility like a nursing home would be or a hospital. And that's important to note, the legal distinction. This is basically the same as if she lived in her house or lived in an apartment complex, but you're paying a bunch of other hired staff and it's a locked facility because people with dementia wander. But it's still considered her home. However, you're not thinking about the comfort care kit that you have at her house because the assumption is, hospice, when we moved her over, you don't change the hospice company. It's still home hospice, right? They don't make you do anything different. You're just like, okay, they probably prescribed a comfort care kit to them. I don't have to think about the one at home.
You still have the original one from December at this point.
Because you're not thinking about it. It's in a drawer.
You're not having to use it very often.
Oh, no. Yeah. I think we used it like once when she was having like some shortness of breath and extreme pain with her back.
Like a dose.
It was like a dose of the morphine.
Of multiple doses.
God, no.
You've got, okay.
No. And so my mom also, mind you, because she has multiple myeloma, she does get a fentanyl patch. So she's not opioid naive, right? That's a term we use for people who are not exposed to opioids at all. So there's a little less of a fear factor of like knowing like she's had codeine before. And it's a very low dose that's given. Well, within months of her going into the home, she started to decline really rapidly. She was in increasing amounts of pain, and she was starting to have a lot of behavioral issues that caused a lot of tension, not just with my aunt who was coming to visit daily and talking a lot to the facility. I was glad my aunt came to visit my mom. But it did create sort of some tensions with the staff. My mom was having really, really strong behaviors. And every time my mom would do that, they would send her to the geriatric psych ER, which was super traumatic for her.
Right.
Because one of the promises of hospice is you don't have to be hospitalized. You don't have to be subject to that type of disorientation. You can, be peacefully at home. And every time she would be sent to Geri Psy, she would be very confused. She would have to be injected with Haldol. She wouldn't eat for days after. And so I had conflicts with the facility of like, can we not send my mom to the ER every time this happens? And then they would kind of snap back at me, with an implication that I didn't care. And I'm like, no, it's because I care, because this is destroying her quality of life.
She has got this new and very scary battle happening on both a mental and a physical front that she has not adapted to. She
cannot adapt to.
She can't. I would think that people in the business of this type of care would have gained a familiarity with that kind of a struggle, would probably have the experience necessary to deal with that, or to at least lessen the impact for her.
You would think. So she is eating less and less. She is in increasing amounts of pain, and she's having increasing behaviors, as they call it.
Right.
And I am advocating for better pain management because I know a lot of the behaviors are rooted in pain, while minimizing sedatives, which tend to be overused. And they were also going to kind of keep her on that trajectory of starving because she was basically knocked out if she was on them.
And so you're fighting that uphill battle.
And then my aunt, who is also interfering and saying, oh, yes, well, Rachel always does things her own way. And, because she is not my fan either.
Again, a Hollywood screenwriter is, at hand here, putting all of this unnecessary drama into a situation where you still have to deal with the sight of your mother declining in front of you. And
rapidly.
You don't have the emotional bandwidth for all of this other unnecessary shit, but it's going on and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you articulated that so well because it felt like I was in the middle of a hurricane. Yeah. And the only thing I could do was focus on what is best for my mom. Like, that is all I care about.
As you demonstrated earlier, she advocated for you every moment she could and made sure that you were taken care of. And now you were here to do the same thing for her. And you've got all of these bumblebees buzzing around your head while you're trying to focus on that.
And we're right on the verge of, I'm ready to pull my mom from the facility because I start to fear that we are increasingly getting to the end of her life as she's declining so rapidly. So I'm sitting here strongly contemplating moving her. This is early July of 2023. And so we decide that we're going to come down in a week. Before we even can do that, I get a call on the 7th that she has fallen. And they request to take her to the ER to check for broken bones. And of course, I consent to that, even though I'm nervous about the ER traumatizing her. I definitely don't want her to have a broken hip. So they take her and get her checked out. She doesn't have any breaks, but I'm getting other people I know and trust to have eyes on her. And my friend Allison Stratton, who was a hospice nurse for many years, she's a registered nurse. She's telling me that, my mom's condition is looking pretty bad. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be down there in a week. But the next day, I get a call from the facility that my mom has been found doubled over, non-responsive. This is both the facility and hospice calling me. And her oxygen saturation is in the 70s. And if you know anything about oxygen saturation, it's a real emergency when it gets below the low 90s.
You made public a record of that contact.
That's right.
Which they listed stats like her blood pressure, that oxygen saturation. They said that she was actively dying.
That's right. And that was declared by a medical professional, a nurse. Yeah. And that is the call I got. Your mom is dying. She has hours to days to live. Get down here now. Yeah. And we immediately jumped into action. Unfortunately, we were having I'd say the storm of the century, but these days it's the storm of every few years. So we didn't get down to the evening of the 10th. And at that point, my mom has been completely non-responsive for well over 24 hours. And I was expecting when I arrived there that she would have either a morphine drip as well as oxygen, because I'd seen my grandparents die. They all had that. It was my understanding that comfort care measures would include that. And so I was a little confused when I get there and she's in clear discomfort. She's not responsive. She's not speaking. She's not really blinking. She cannot make a sound, but when she's turned her face, she grimaces in agony and some sounds come out. So it's clear that she is in terrible pain. Yeah. And so I start asking, where's the morphine? Because we need to have comfort care for her. And this was met with some odd response. Like, she seems fine to us, we don't think she needs anything. And I'm very confused by this response. And so I begin recording what my mom is like. Yeah. I'm asking people to come in, like Allison's coming in, and I'm sitting here going, am I crazy? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? This is somebody who needs morphine, right? Who needs comfort care. I'm just confused about why it's being denied.
You get a sense that they aren't on the same wavelength as you.
I did.
And you begin documenting everything that happens.
Yes.
What made you decide to do that?
I was concerned about medical malpractice.
Right.
Because, again, I'm medically knowledgeable, and I know it's standard of care to provide comfort care at end of life when someone's been declared dying.
You're thinking there's some steps being missed. There's something that has been overlooked. I want to make sure that I have as much documentation as I can.
That's part of it. The other part of it was hoping that my documentation, I could show it to them and they would be convinced to prescribe it.
Right. At this point, you aren't thinking about the comfort care kit that's back home.
Not yet. My husband suggested it.
Yes.
My husband's like, if they don't prescribe it to the facility, I can run and get it from the house. And we can at least have it on hand in the car, because you don't want to keep it in the facility because you don't want other patients to access it. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. We do have that at the house. And we're staying in my mom's room. We've set up an inflatable mattress on the floor in her room because I made a promise to my mom that she was not going to die alone.
Right.
And I barely made it just in time while she was still actively dying to be there. And I don't know how much of my presence she can sense, but being there is so critical for me.
And you have someone there with you all the time.
Yeah,
someone is there to see everything that goes on. Everything
even
that you're
recording it on his phone.
Yeah, so you've got not just the documentation that you're making, there is
his documentation.
There is a witness or witnesses the entire time that you're there with her.
That is right.
So at this point, you've got hospice and the medical staff of the facility there.
And most of the staff, remind you, are not medical staff. They're aides.
Right.
So they're caregiving staff who can turn her.
Yeah.
But they can't prescribe medications and they can't administer any medications not prescribed to the facility. And that's important, right? So if a comfort kit isn't prescribed to them, they can't touch it by law.
Okay.
They are not medical professionals.
Right.
They can only do what the facility has and instructs. But still, we are hoping that hospice will come through and prescribe it to the facility so someone at the facility can administer it at least.
Right.
Because even though From everything I understood, I was certainly within my legal rights to use the comfort kit because it was my mom's legal residence. And under Georgia law, you can use any emergency medication for your loved one in their legal residence, whether that's a home or assisted living. But I still don't want to be the one responsible. Unfortunately, it felt very much like the choice of responsibility was taken out of our hands when at about 4:30 in the morning on July 12th, my husband and I were awakened by the sound of teeth smashing together.
And what did that sound indicate?
That's something called agonal respiration. It's because the muscles around the ribs that enable you to breathe in and out, they're no longer working, only the jaw. And they start to experience what they call air hunger. And I knew that this is exactly the instance in which morphine is prescribed, not just for pain, but for respiratory distress, for air hunger. I run into the hallway and ask, is there a comfort care kit? Has it been prescribed yet? Can somebody help? Nope, there's nothing. Sorry, can't help you. At that point, my husband gets the comfort kit from the car, and I follow my training, and I call hospice to get the instruction. And they give me the dose. They are like, yes, this is what comfort care kits are prescribed for. It should be fine.
It's prescribed in December. It doesn't have a date that says don't.
No, it doesn't expire because she never went. It would be different if she had gone off hospice. That's a different story.
Does the emergency line keep a record of the calls that come in or what is discussed?
They only keep a record that there's a call, as far as we know. I had assumed that they recorded them, but we don't think that they record them. Okay. It seems I probably would not have been in this situation had it been recorded.
But every medical professional that you've dealt with, everyone in that facility is going to know what that symptom is. They're going to know what she's experiencing.
And in fact, the people who were the overnight staff were like, we don't have morphine, but she sure needs it.
Right.
And that was the response.
And we're not talking about like intravenous. We're not talking about an injection. This is oral morphine, correct?
That is right. Comfort care kits across the country, families are only prescribed sublingual, which is under the tongue. And sublingual morphine, it's just slowly absorbed. It's not even fully absorbed. And the whole bottle itself, the way it is dosed, is designed to have room for error, where like a nervous family member or whatever, where they're not going to kill their loved one.
Because they know this is going into the hands of somebody who does not work with this on a regular basis.
Fully, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So it's basically designed to minimize the risk of overdose.
Got it.
And so I get the dose. It doesn't really make much of a difference. At this point, my mom is so far into the dying process, she's not even able to adequately metabolize the drug, which is also important.
Right.
Because you and I, who have normal respiration, breathing, digestion, blood flow, she's got black fingers and toes. She's not getting adequate blood flow. We will break down morphine quickly and use it. And people who are actively dying, morphine does not get broken down because the organs aren't working.
Right.
Okay. So this is important. I'm not thinking of that. I'm just thinking, please, God, can this relieve the agonal breathing?
Yeah, you want to provide any kind of relief that you can in, however much time she has left.
That's right. Unfortunately, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference because she had been in agonal breathing for hours at this point, and within about 25, 30 minutes, she dies. Still gasping for air. It didn't change her breathing.
No.
And this was with staff coming in. They even put some lorazepam on her lower lip after. Nothing changed. It was so far gone.
But you did what you could. You had what was available to you.
That's right.
If it could have made any sort of difference, if it did make a difference, you at least were able to.
I at least tried.
You at least had it. You were able to try that.
It was just too little, too late.
Yeah, and you'd been preparing for this since
December.
7-8 months before that.
Right.
And you have all of this documentation. You have all of these witnesses. You have all of these professionals who know the history and the story, and they have seen all of this.
Yeah. And so my mom dies, and I can just grieve.
Yeah.
And I grieved hard. All the agony, like all the pain of the years of watching my mom die from Alzheimer's and cancer and everything with the family, it just burst out. And I wailed. And I remember even when I did, the staff kind of reacted strangely to me. Like they were very distant. And I didn't know what was going on because I called and hospice came and told the hospice that she had died, and they came and they bathed her, they dressed her. So mind you, this doesn't look like a crime scene. They're moving the body, they're changing her clothes.
Right.
Everything seems normal, except at the facility, people are acting like I don't exist. And that was odd because in the past, when I've gone through a hardship, like when my cat died at the vet, people would hug me.
Yeah.
Instead, people looked at me like I was...
They're going out of their way not to comfort
Yes, they're going
you
out of their
or
way not to comfort.
say anything. Or...
It was weird. And it continues to get worse as the day progresses because we're waiting for family to come see my mom and say goodbye.
You're still there at the home.
I'm still there for hours,
yes.
right? And it's around like 10 in the morning, 9:30, 10 in the morning. The funeral home's like, look, we're not going to be able to get there till later. You should probably just go home and get some rest. Because, of course, they knew I hadn't slept all night. And while I'm sitting there waiting to leave, I see a cop from Columbia County Sheriff's Office walk in. And I don't think anything of it. But the staff are like speaking to him in really hushed tones. And again, ignoring me. And in retrospect, I realized it had to do with me. At the time, I don't think it has anything to do with me at all. Or I think, well, maybe they call the cops after every death. I don't know. But I know that now is the time to go back to the house and continue to make arrangements with the funeral home. I had made contact with them before she died to be like, well, what days are open? I know she's been given a couple of days to live. I need to give family advance notice that she might die within the next few days. And so this is also important because this was viewed as evidence against me of some premeditated death, right? But
do you get to rest? Like, do you get to, when you get to her home, do you?
Nope.
No.
Because guess what happens on the car ride home?
Oh, you don't even get to the house.
I sure don't.
You learn that investigators have taken her body.
While I am in the car.
How do you learn that?
The funeral home calls me and says, there's a problem. We can't pick up your mom's body because it's been taken to the GBI crime lab in Atlanta.
And so now you know that her death is being investigated.
As suspicious. And I know then, based on the behavior, that I have likely been accused of something heinous.
Yeah. So
probably murder.
So the obvious question I'm going to ask is this normal in a situation like your mom's, that they would take the body?
It is absolutely not normal. For hospice deaths in general, that is considered an expected death.
Right.
And that is normally something handled by the coroner.
You had been told on July 9th
yes.
that she had hours to days
That's
to
right.
live. And I'm not trying to be callous here, but in 100% of situations like the one that she was in, they know that this is what's going to happen. They know this is where it leads.
Yeah.
When did you see the search warrant that said homicide investigation?
So I get that call, and I know immediately that I need to contact a lawyer.
Yeah.
I wasn't born yesterday.
Of course.
I looked up the first attorney I could find in the area. I told him the story, and he said, you're probably right. Hopefully they will realize it's a misunderstanding, but you need to prepare for investigators to make contact with you as soon as you're back at that house. And he stayed on the phone with me, mind you, the entire time. This is like an hours-long phone conversation because I am losing my mind with terror because the only reason bodies are taken to the crime lab is if there's been a homicide investigation. I used to be a federal investigator.
Right.
I know how these things work. And sure enough, within 20 minutes of getting there, 2 plainclothes officers and 5 Columbia County sheriff's cars pull up in the yard, knock on the door, and ask for me to hand over my phone. And I said, you can talk to my lawyer and you can get a search warrant. The investigator says, you know how this looks, don't you? I said, it looks like I know my rights.
So they don't have a warrant for your phone?
Not yet.
They don't have a warrant to search the
But
house?
I asked them to.
Yeah.
And about 2.5 hours later, that is when they come back with the warrant. And it not only has my phone, but it also has the comfort kit. He'd been talking to my lawyer, so the lawyer told him the story. And so I'm relieved a little bit to see that as a comfort kit, because he's going to see she has a prescribed morphine prescription.
Right.
He's going to see that like she was on hospice. I'm assuming everything's going to be cleared up with this, but my blood ran cold to read. It was Rachel Waters' homicide investigation. It was then that I knew that I had become a murder suspect.
A lady who began the process of dying when you were 800 miles away.
That's right.
In New York City. You went home to be with her and to care for her and to love your mother in her final days. And this led to a murder investigation. How did your family react to any of this?
So I had no idea And I still do not know when they learned of the investigation. All I know is that very soon after my mom's death, they cut contact with me. My assumption was that investigators within days would find out nothing had gone wrong. So I never expected them to make contact with family or anybody. And they certainly didn't make any contact with my husband, who was a direct witness. So I'm looking at my husband as a litmus test of like, well, if they haven't talked to him, it's probably because they already resolved it.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that they distanced themselves because they assumed that there was something fishy going on with you, or did they distance themselves because there's too much heat here? I don't really want any part of it.
I think it's more that. There were some texts, some messages that were progressively more emotionally distant, and I didn't really understand. And then by the time Christmas rolled around, contact just died. It was just done. And all the sympathy cards that came in the mail, they knew I was my mom's only child, and they knew how close we were. And these were family friends as well as distant cousins. Not a single one of them mentioned my name. They were all addressed to my mom's siblings. Sorry for their loss.
Now, in the weeks that follow, what other contact do you have with investigators? What do you hear from Columbia County? You hear nothing.
Nothing.
You know that they've shown up. They've asked for your phone at some point.
And I gave them my phone, and I gave them the e-kit, the comfort kit. And then it is dead silence for 18 months.
And you continue to hear nothing. And then... talk about the Instagram comment that you got from Ginger Zoe 1. Who is this person?
Do not know.
You still don't know.
Well, never know. They appeared to have created a burner account just to leave that comment. I was already in the process of trying to renovate my mom's home in accordance with her wishes. And I was using the funds that were left over from that home sale that hadn't gone to her care to put some money into fixing this house up. And I'm still a suspect.
Yeah.
I don't have a death certificate.
Right.
There's no access to life insurance. By the way, you need a death certificate with a cause of death for that.
Everything is frozen.
Everything is frozen in time, including my grief. It's also really hard to work through my mom's estate when I don't have a cause of death, because mind you, I had questions too. How long was my mom non-responsive? How did she die? I was not getting answers from the facility.
Which partly explains the search for documentation.
Yes, that was the reason.
Yeah,
a year after my mom died, this is important, a year after, I had to send a demand letter through an attorney to get all of her records. And that is when I got all those medical records that you saw, documenting leading up to her death. And I also see a peculiar note in one of the medical records that gives me a little insight, and that is that the hospice nurse documented that I requested euthanasia. My blood ran cold, because then I was like, is this who accused me?
Right.
But also, I had recorded that conversation. That exact conversation she referenced.
Okay.
I had requested morphine.
Right. And so now...
I had not requested euthanasia. I had requested morphine.
Do you have a place to send that conversation?
I do not, because I am a suspect. And you can't take any kind of legal action whatsoever when you're a suspect. You're under investigation for murder. But I'm starting to have an inkling of what might have happened. And I'm like, was my request for morphine misconstrued as a request for euthanasia? Maybe she misunderstood.
You've got all this documentation before you get this Instagram comment.
That's
so you're aware of all of this.
That is right. But they don't know I have this documentation.
Right. So you're more familiar with everything that was going on when you were not around.
Yes.
Than they are aware.
Yes. And so I have just gone down to Georgia to fix my mom's well and electrical. And I have to fly home early because my kitty gets diagnosed with cancer. The other terrible swing of luck. I get home early and I'm planning my 42nd birthday. And this Ginger Zoe person on Instagram writes, "Why have you been indicted? For the murder of your mom. This is why your family disowned you." And then she posts this very official looking indictment, sort of a copy paste that has the number, it has the judge, and it has Rachel Waters, felony murder and malice murder.
So they're the two charges I mentioned at the top of the program.
The most serious charges that anyone can get. They are minimum life in prison, maximum death penalty, if found guilty.
What do you do next?
I immediately texted that attorney I called the first day I found that I was a suspect. And I sent him a screenshot, and I said, his name's Robert Homler. I said, "Robert, is this real? Am I about to be arrested?" And he texted back one word, "Yes." There had been a warrant for my arrest for several weeks. If I had not flown home early because my cat was sick, it would have already been issued before my flight, and I would have been caught at TSA in Augusta, Georgia, and probably still sitting in a jail cell to this day.
While you were just there taking care of this house.
That's right.
Yeah. But say that they had contacted you on July 9th and told you that she was in the process of dying and that you need to get down there because she has hours to days to live. And you say, I can't make it. I'm going to stay here in New York City.
It never would have happened.
She still
would die.
She still dies. She still dies on the 12th.
Yeah.
Whether you go down there or not.
That's right.
That doesn't affect what happens in Georgia if you stay here. So, but in their...
All medical evidence would show that you are correct.
But in their investigation, they believe that you leaving New York City and going to Georgia and being there and administering this medicine caused her death.
That seems to have been the implication. And so Robert is on the phone with me, and he's like, Rachel, if I were in your position right now, I would get the only attorney in the country to defend me if I were accused of something like this, and that's Brian Steele. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, the Young Thug attorney? There's no way this guy's going to take my case. He's famous. And he said, no, he will. I have him on the phone.
Wow.
Thank God I hadn't touched that money from the house.
Yeah, really.
Because you don't even think of it. Like, the money is just gone. It just evaporates. And that's not just legal fees. You're also thinking about bond and other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And your job, forget it. You've lost your job because you're already making headlines. Mm-hmm. As soon as that indictment is on public record, I already started getting Google pings that night with my photo saying that I had murdered my mom with morphine, because a lot of the headlines didn't say allegedly. Mind you, at this point, before turning myself in, NYPD could knock on my door and take me away to Rikers or wherever at any time, because there's an active warrant for my arrest.
But you make arrangements to
come to Georgia to turn myself in.
Get out of the city.
That's right.
Take a trip.
To be driven.
Make that 800-mile trip yet again.
You cannot fly when you have a warrant for your arrest.
Of course not. So you've got to get in the car and drive down to Georgia and surrender to authorities.
And that is exactly what we ended up doing. I turned myself in on the day of my bond hearing to the Columbia County Sheriff's Office at 5 in the morning.
Now, has this already been, making the headlines on television and in the papers and stuff in Augusta?
So not TV yet, not till the day of my bond hearing, but it's all in the papers. Okay. It's all over like Augusta social media. It's on the jail report. Right, it's on Augusta Today. There are already people who are calling for my death. Right. Ye old Brad Owens.
Mm-hmm. Now tell us about who is he?
He's a media personality, and I think he ran for political office down in Augusta. And he's already decided I'm guilty and calls for me to be executed.
But he's not like with the
no,
Augusta.
He's like a social media influencer as far as I know, and writes like for Augusta Today, I think. And so I have him. I've got the jail report. I've got the Independent. I've got the Mirror. I have national, international news because I'm distinctive looking, right? I got pink hair and a septum piercing, and it's a salacious story. Interesting
that you mentioned that. Somebody commented on the Augusta Press story about you and mentioned your red hair dye.
That was Brad Owens.
Oh, that's him?
Yeah, that's the one.
So he says that red hair dye in one's 40s is a, quote, red flag to issues. What kinds of issues does obnoxious red hair dye point to? I
have no idea what.
In your 40s.
My hair isn't red either.
I was interested to learn more, but he didn't psychoanalyze you any further.
No, I know. I this is where the story perhaps becomes the most interesting.
Yeah.
There was no sitting DA at the time I was indicted.
Right. This was an acting district attorney.
There wasn't even an acting district attorney by the time I was indicted. There was a gap.
I got you. Okay.
So the district attorney who had been there, he had cleared my case to go to a grand jury, but he was not the one who was around to present it because he was called up. Bobby Christine was called up to service in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. But Natalie Payne gets the case on her desk after I've been indicted. So she's going into this bond hearing, and I'm not really her case. Mm-hmm. She didn't make a decision to pursue these charges because DAs have discretion.
She's kind of inherited you.
She inherited me.
Right.
That is exactly right. So DAs have a lot of discretion in what cases they take or don't. But now her hands are tied. She has to argue this case in court no matter what.
Right.
But she seems to have some instincts that something seems weird, which surprised me because you don't expect a DA to do that. But when my bond hearing comes up, and at this point I've been in jail for the entire day. I'm in my orange jumpsuit. I've gone through the whole process of the strip search and the showering and the mugshot, and my mugshot's now all over the jail report too. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get out because, as far as we know, this judge is extremely harsh and does not tend to give... It's rare to get out on bond after a murder charge.
It all depends on the lottery of these.
There are so many things that can go wrong, and especially if the DA chooses to fight bond. But watching this bond hearing, she starts to telegraph what seem to be doubts about the charges. She's saying, I don't think there was any malice. Now, mind you, one of the charges is malice murder. She's like, I don't think she did it for money. Her mom was in a lot of pain. She's indicating that my mom is already dying, so at least they said that. But she had pulled her bank records. I think she was seeing that I was supporting my mom's care, which sort of blows any narrative or motive that might have been suggested.
Right.
And she starts citing things that are easily answerable, like me Googling possible charges after her death. And then I realized they didn't know I was tipped off. Also, do they even know that why I was in town? Because she seems to not have any context for why I was even in Georgia in the first place.
They don't have access to these documents that I quoted from earlier. That
it seems that well, we don't know for sure, but it seems that some important people did not have access. That is what it seems. And mind you, this is still being actively looked at.
Because that's one thing that there was documentation of, this call on the 9th that tells you
that's right.
actively dying hours to days.
I don't know if they ever saw that call.
Right.
There's some gaps in information that they have, which you're thinking, please God, let me get bond because I have all this information to fill in gaps. I can explain this stuff easily, and I have official records that can explain it.
Yeah.
And so Natalie, I think, sensing that something was awry, opts to not fight bond, which is really rare. The judge, he granted it at $200,000, which, Jesus Christ, it's an astronomical amount, even just paying the 15% of it that you never get back. At that point, though, it's a huge victory because I have a mountain of evidence that will hopefully, and we call that exculpatory evidence, which is evidence to innocence, that we can share with the DA and also with the medical examiner. And the DA also is going to share all the evidence they have in the case against me. And when I looked through that discovery, Brandon, I was floored. I did not know that someone could be indicted on so little evidence.
I want to go back to something that you said a little earlier. Until this bond hearing, and until Natalie Payne starts to put some of these things together and ask some of these questions, you mentioned that a possible outcome of this could have been you on death row.
Yeah.
Going home to be with your mother in her final days. That was one possible flip of the coin in this mess.
Yeah.
If you had to really kind of put together what you think started to turn the tide and shed some light on what really happened here for these investigators and for the DA and for the judge and for whoever else needed, what would you say would be the thing? What started
There are a few things. I think what might have started to turn the tide, and this is speculative, but there was an interesting exchange in the discovery that Natalie herself retrieved after my indictment, because she continued to dig after I was indicted.
Yeah.
She has an interaction with the memory care facility where she gets a record of people being signed in the days leading up to my mom's death, visitors. And in that interaction, she mentions, why isn't Rachel Waters signed in on here? And someone offhand, probably a front desk person, just casually says to her, oh, we don't make people sign in if they're there to see someone who's dying.
So she hears that.
She hears that. Now, as far as we're aware, she doesn't have any records that she was dying or anything like that. But I think that might have instilled some doubt in her mind because this appears from all the other discovery to be the first mention to anyone on the side of law enforcement that my mom was dying actively.
So,
as far as we know,
we'll go back to the possibility that you wind up on death row and you're there because investigators simply don't have some important conversations with key people. Like we said earlier.
And I have not collected evidence.
Yeah, like we said earlier, they didn't interview the witnesses who were in the room, whether those were hospice or caregivers or your husband.
No.
They didn't speak to the front desk staff who would simply explain what they just explained in that story to Natalie Payne.
And if they did, we don't have a record of it.
Yeah. So because some key people don't talk to one another, you could possibly wind up executed for going to be with your mother in the final days of her life.
If the stars aligned in the worst way, which they had in so many ways leading up to this point, yes,
Right.
that is a possibility.
Yeah.
Where the tide turned for me personally, the greatest blessing I could have ever gotten was Ginger Zoe, wherever you are out there. Thank you and God bless you for saving my life.
Oh, this is your random Instagram comment.
I know you probably hate to hear it, but you did.
Because
Because of Ginger Zoe, I was not arrested by surprise.
he or she, I'm assuming a she,
I'm assuming a she.
mobilized you and,
Yeah.
and got you looking into what to do next and how to approach this situation.
Yeah, it was meant to be sort of a vicious bullying comment.
Yeah.
And instead, I was able to do one of the most important things in getting bond, which is to turn yourself in. You are showing cooperation. Because if you're arrested on a warrant and you're just taken to a jail and who knows where, and you stand for a judge and have to be extradited to
Wow.
Georgia, you know what you can't do? You can't gather evidence. You can't get on your laptop and get all those records that you had. You can't get on your phone and get those videos of your mom and the recordings to get to your attorney. You may not even be able to get on the phone with your attorney. You know, you don't want someone to know that the law is coming after you. But
that important scene in Goodfellas where they call Henry Hill first and they say,
Right.
hey, we're on the way.
yeah, I am. So Brian Steele, he asked me a question after I got out on bond, you know, how far I was willing to go with this. You know, are you willing to stand trial for murder? And that possibility, however remote, or would you be interested in a plea deal? Because that is an easy win. And that is how actually most guilty pleas, you know, most cases are resolved through plea deals in this country, close to like 90%, right? And, you know, my response was like, no, I will absolutely stand trial. I will stand trial for murder before I ever take a plea deal because I committed no crime.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I took a plea deal, I would obliterate any chance I had of real justice. Because I had been thinking about all the things that must have gone wrong in order to lead to me being indicted, what I could do to prevent this from happening to someone else who I knew would not be able to have the same amount of evidence or have the legal resources or even the knowledge I had to defend themselves adequately.
Right.
And so I told Brian I'm going to see it through to the very end.
Yeah.
But I have this mountain of evidence compared to the discovery. It was my mom's autopsy report, which showed that my mom had liver necrosis, complete kidney failure, 70% artery blockage, pneumonia, brainstem atrophy, bone and brain lesions. She had everything wrong with her that could go wrong. And so these morphine values that she had were kind of what in medical literature is in the borderline zone. And I had been speaking to forensics experts already before my indictment about it. And that was part of some of the fears, like, well, toxicology, they were like, toxicology is unpredictable, especially for morphine. The levels weren't super high, but we were confused as why the finding was morphine toxicity because there were so many other causes of death that were listed.
Yeah. And you had spoken earlier to the difference in a fully functional, healthy
That's
body
right.
breaking down the morphine as opposed to somebody in the state that she was in.
Who cannot break down morphine.
Yeah, with all of this physical failure already
That's right.
so advanced. They also had the prescribed kit
Right.
at the time of the
The prescription
investigation.
did not show up in the discovery,
Yeah.
even though it had been handed over. They didn't have the records that my mom had been declared actively dying, and it would be an expected finding. And so my attorney and I realized, oh my God, we have photos of this prescription. We have documentation of the prescription. We also have all of her medical records that they don't seem to have. And we wonder what would change if we simply provided the records with context to the medical examiner and to the DA. And so that is exactly what we did. We handed over everything we had, and that included videos of my mom at the end of her life, photographs, the recordings of my conversation with the nurse, her prescription, her medical records when I was called down, all the records of my flight getting down there after she was declared actively dying. Signed affidavits from my nurse friend who came and examined my mom as she was dying.
Now they have a mountain of missing pieces to this puzzle.
That's right. But in August, we get the surprise news that after reviewing my mom's medical records, that her cause of death is no longer ruled a homicide. It's undetermined. That's sort of, we don't know why he put it as undetermined. It could be, to leave the decision up to the DA, to not override them. Or it could have simply been because she had so many things wrong with her.
Yeah. And this was medical examiner Keith Lehman.
Yeah, Dr. Lehman.
So with the GBI.
Yes.
And the word homicide comes off of it entirely.
Yes. And we sent all those same records to the DA, and she talked to Dr. Lehman, and within hours of her conversation, she announced she was dropping all charges.
Okay.
And then the next day, it goes on the judge's desk, the case is dismissed, and I am suddenly reverted to normal, everyday civilian status again.
Yeah.
I am no longer charged with murder. I am no longer a suspect. My rights have been restored. My passport is back. You're free to live the rest of your life. Here's your death certificate. Congratulations. Go get life insurance now.
and you can finally take some deep breaths and just assess the chaos of the last couple of years.
That's right.
And there you go. You're free to go. You just return to your life and everything's normal again. You just go back to your job and you live happily ever after, right?
Ha.
You...
Yeah. No. Nope. Because once you are indicted for a crime as serious as murder, those are the headlines. That is what every HR company will look at.
Of course.
And you are a toxic asset to any HR. It doesn't matter what your criminal record says.
Because they're going to be explaining that away for the rest of the time.
And they can't do that, and they don't want to do that.
And this speaks not just to that job. This speaks to your employability.
My
this
employability,
speaks to the future
period.
ability
Yes.
to get a job.
Yes.
Your savings is
They're
gone.
gone.
Yeah.
All my retirement
Any 401ks that you've earned.
gone.
Your ability to grieve. You haven't even been able to.
No.
How long past your mother's death are we now?
We're now 2.5 years.
Yeah. So you have not even had a moment to sit and grieve, because in the 18 months that they left you alone, you had hanging over your head when you left Georgia, they had taken her body to the crime lab in Atlanta.
And I had no cause of death.
Yeah. And so you had this sword of Damocles that you were not ever able to just go, okay, this is life right now. Let me process what I've just been through. Let me process what happened. Let me finalize.
No, it's all just endless lack of closure. And now my life has been obliterated. All I have is the small amount of life insurance that came, because you still go into debt. Even when you had a life savings, we now have debts too, to friends and to credit card companies. I had to survive while I was out on bond as well. And, I couldn't even so much as get on Rover for pet sitting gigs because a background check is a part of it. 2 counts of murder. Yeah, you're going to have me in your house to look after your cat and dog.
I said at the top of this program, I'm about to speak to someone and have them tell their story who was accused of killing their mother. And this could happen to anybody. I said those 2 things. And I guarantee you most everybody who listened to this without being aware of what the story was probably said, how the hell could I ever be in that position? Hopefully, having heard now your story from the beginning, people can see how easy that can happen to somebody else.
Yep.
So, how hasn't this happened to other people? How are you the first? Is there any answer to how in the hell you're the first person that wound up in this position? What was unique about your situation?
How hasn't it happened to someone else? I'll tell you this. We don't know if it hasn't, because what was unique about my situation was that I had collected so much evidence to my innocence.
Okay, that's a good point.
And people tend to think, well, that would never happen to me because I don't screw up in this way, or I'm not the type of person. They profile, and I am a rule follower to a T.
Yeah.
I followed every rule and still ended up in this position because there are huge gaps in the law that people can fall through. We do know this. We do know that family members get accused of murdering their loved ones in hospice all the time. They are often accused by other family members. But what we don't know is what happens after. We just know that I'm the first to be indicted after someone was declared actively dying. All it would take for someone to end up in my position but end up completely screwed is, let's say a family member accuses an abuse of morphine and that law enforcement officer does not know, because there is no record, that this family member has been deputized to use a controlled substance, right? The whole reason we get precedents in law is because something like this happens to somebody. There hasn't been a need, as far as we were aware, of this law until what happened to me exposed this glaring gap. And what would have likely closed that gap, because again, that felony murder charge came from the idea that I was in illegal possession of morphine. I picked it up from CVS myself. My mom wasn't even with me. She wasn't able to be with me. The understanding is I am her power of attorney,
that
caregiver.
At least is documented. That is documented. It was on file in their...
But they didn't seem to have the documentation.
But you gave it to them. The prescription...
I sure did.
This honestly just sounds like a case of a lot of missed connections, whether that was conversations that needed to be had or pieces of documentation that could have been, easily made in just a matter of minutes.
And we don't know if there was intent behind these misconnections or if there was an accident.
Right.
We are still working to find that out. But what we can say is if what I am proposing to close that gap would result in significantly fewer chances of misconnections at a very low cost, easy implementable way that would spare other family members the agony of being charged potentially with murder or wrongdoing in the death of their loved one.
Right. You're advocating for a set of legal guidelines.
That's right.
That are going to protect people in that position.
That's right.
From living a similar nightmare in the future. Tell us about Marsha's Law.
So one of the things that I realized after I was indicted, and one of the things I knew I had to do, was first, I had to share my story to make people aware of this being a possibility, that you can do everything right with your loved one on home hospice, and still, if you are accused or implicated, end up charged with murder. And after looking through all the evidence, it became clear to us that it seemed that law enforcement themselves were radically unfamiliar with the process of home hospice and what that looks like, or the normalization of providing morphine to a loved one at end of life. It never shows up in any of their documentation. And we keep seeing this unauthorized morphine use showing up, which means they are unaware of it being authorized. And so Marsha's Law would, in effect, be ideally a nationwide law eventually, but I want to start state by state, especially in Georgia, that would require all hospice companies, when they put a loved one into home hospice and they prescribe that comfort care kit and they train and deputize the family or caregivers, at its most basic, this law would require a physical, preferably a digital backup too, but at least a physical copy with contact sheets to be kept with this comfort care kit, showing that the following family members or caregivers have been deputized and trained on the administration of the controlled substances, including morphine, et cetera, spelled out in this comfort care kit in the event of their loved one facing any of these emergencies for which they've been prescribed, signed and witnessed by the hospice company. And then the family member would keep that with the comfort care kit. The hospice company would have a copy of it. And by law, it would be required, ideally, to be provided as well to any sort of coroner or medical examiner in the event of that person's death. That way, everyone knows, every investigator from the moment there is any kind of search warrant or anything knows, okay, this was authorized. We can expect to find morphine in their system. This person signed off on it
and this person signed off on it.
That's right. We can expect to find it in their system, so you operate at least from the assumption. That doesn't mean that families don't sometimes abuse morphine. They very well could. But at least we show who is allowed to use it. We know that use is going to be expected from the record. And that is the most important thing, I think, that across the board, that just be a required, mandated part of the hospice service that providers give.
It's surprising to me that a document like that has not been part of issuing these kits from the beginning. Is this the main focus of Marsha's Law?
It is.
What we just talked about?
It is. The best written laws are those that are very simple, narrow, and easy to implement. Right? You don't want something that's going to be super costly or complicated to get it passed. If we could eventually expand it to have more training, it might look different somewhat from state to state or by the time it gets to the federal level. But at the heart of it is this documentation that everyone signed off on, that these family caregivers and or caregivers hired by the family have been deputized and trained on using these medications for their loved ones.
What can people listening, if somebody hearing this story goes, that makes a lot of sense, I want to, lend support to this, is there a petition I can sign? What can people do if they...
So, right now, people can visit marshaslaw.org to learn more about the law, as well as to contribute to the GoFundMe I have to support my efforts to get Marsha's Law passed.
Right.
So every bit of money donated will support me traveling to legislatures in Georgia, as well as other southern states first, and then nationwide to promote Marsha's Law at the national level. It also helps support some of the publicity efforts and legal consultants for Marsha's Law to shore it up to enable it to pass nationwide. And so it's a big hurdle, right? Because you're trying to build public trust with lawmakers who might have concerns being associated with you after those charges. And so when lawmakers see that there's public momentum and there's support, whether it is financial in the beginning or when that is on the books, calls to your legislators, calls to your state reps, calls to your federal representatives to say, I'm in support of Marsha's Law. That helps build confidence that there's a real need and demand for this for the 75 million American families who will ultimately rely on home hospice care for their loved one, because this is something the majority of Americans will be vulnerable to. And that is the reality of home hospice. It is both a wonderful gift for people to have so their loved ones can die at home and at peace, but it is also a tremendous responsibility. And the terror and uncertainty you can feel, and that so many families feel around using these medications as it stands, to alleviate that in some way is tremendous, because at the end of the day, it will ultimately ensure that not only are they less likely to face allegations of wrongdoing or charges, but that they can give their loved one the support they need and comfort at end of life. And that's a huge relief. And I think that if I had had something like that, if I had had official documentation, I would have been able to medicate my mom every 2 hours as it was prescribed, rather than just the one dose. I would have felt more confident about giving her. If Marsha's Law had existed for me, I would have felt so much more confident, like, oh yes, using it as prescribed is totally okay. All right, great. And my mom probably would have had a lot more relief.
Right.
And I want to be able to give families that.
That makes perfect sense. Before we go, give us one of your favorite memories of the time with your mom, from any point in your life at all. Leave us with a snapshot of your life with her.
Oh my God.
I know. Take your time. Don't worry about it.
There's so many, and I keep thinking of like really hilariously inappropriate ones because I was such a nightmare teenager who was always like pranking my mom.
Let me tell you something about WNUT. Our base operating maturity level is about 16 years old.
Okay.
There is nothing that you can't say or do on this on this station.
This is the most this one's really obscene, but it's probably great for your viewers and fully context dependent.
That is exactly the kind of thing that we normally deal in.
Yeah. I feel like my publicist will kill me for this one, but it's the memory that always makes me laugh and that makes my old best friend, Ocean, who's like my best friend since we were 5, like just die laughing. So I was such a little shit as a teenager. You know, it's like your divorced parents.
I would know nothing about that.
They're divorced parents. I'm like with my mom. We're thick as thieves, but of course we drive each other crazy. And I'm at that peak age where I'm 16 years old. It's like the age where if you and your mom go to the mall together, you walk 15 steps ahead because you don't want anybody to know you're with your mom. And my mom, she would like pat my butt sometimes to move me along. And oh my God, humiliating things like that. So I am getting progressively more like, ugh, mom, like just edgy. And I also, you know, sometimes I'm deliberately offensive. And
I also would know nothing about that.
And so my mom, she often took me and my friends even on business trips with her out of town. And when I was 16, my mom took me and my best friend, Ocean, to a trip to Washington, D.C. with her. And we're doing the whole tourist circuit. And we've gone to like the Lincoln Memorial, and we're walking, and again, 15 steps behind my mom, and talking and doing our teenage thing. And my mom is talking about something we're going to do when we get to the car, and I'm just kind of ignoring her and continue to yap with my friend. And my mom's getting more and more upset because we're not listening to her, and she's trying to get our attention. And she goes, "You're not even listening to me. I'm trying to tell you something." And I said, "Yeah, Mom, I was listening. What are we going to do when we get to the car?" And she's like angry and kind of huffing. And I was like, "Mom, I was listening. What are we going to do when we get to the car?" And she turns around, she goes, "Fuck you." And I said, "You're going to fuck me?" And she's walking ahead, and I see her start to break down. I see the shaking. I don't know if she's angry. She is laughing her ass off.
It is a Schrodinger's laughter or rage.
And I know that I've just dropped the most brilliant, obscene joke of all time. I'm so proud of myself. Like Ocean's like, fucking awesome.
Your friend is losing his shit. Because
and my mom, "Rachel, don't you ever say anything like that to me ever again."
Yeah, now that you've asked nicely, I'll behave.
But man, that
I would never have been able to get away with some shit like that to either parent.
Oh my God.
You wouldn't have seen me in public for 6 months.
Oh my God. I don't know. I think it was a mix of like friend being around, and also I think my mom, she had such an appreciation. Like my mom loved stand-up comedy. Listen, I think she recognized my shining moment of brilliance at age 16.
I mean, there's a moment where wit will simply stagger anybody,
I think
no matter who the audience.
But keep in mind, dear listener, that was like the pinnacle. Right. It was all downhill from there for my comedy career. But it's funny because that sense of humor is also probably what sadly played into a lot of suspicions about me, because I do have a dark sense of humor, right? It's how I cope with joy. It's how I cope with pain. But
you and I were talking about that off mic. I think generations before, the people who came of age in an internet world don't understand how flippant we could be with topics that are very taboo today.
Oh my God. So seriously, this was the 90s, man.
Yeah. Nothing was off limits. We didn't care, and nobody else did either. And at some point, we just all kind of collectively decided to care.
Right.
But there was a time when you could be as dark as you wanted to be.
Oh, yeah. But I think like that humor, and it still sums up so much of this dynamic where you can be the bickering, annoying kid and say something that should definitely get you grounded, for good. God knows my mom did not discipline me probably nearly enough. But there is still this understanding and appreciation of each other as human beings, as people, know, and I think that was one of the great strengths of our relationship was we laughed a lot together. We shared so much joy in whether it was the same film or the same books and as I grew older, it was cut short by Alzheimer's, but I really got to deepen that relationship with my mom as an adult. And I wish so much that I could have realized it further. She got sick just as I got to this point in my life where I had enough income to show her the world and to spoil her in the way that she kind of spoiled me growing up by taking me and showing me things and taking me on business trips and traveling with me. And I am grateful at the very least that I was able to keep my promise to my mom that she would not die alone, and that I was holding her and with her and was a witness to the very last moments of her life. And if I could have been spared that by not being there, it wouldn't have been worth it to me.
Of course not.
It's about what you can live with. I can live with my life being obliterated and being charged with 2 counts of murder. I could not live with breaking that promise to my mom.
Yeah. This is a very different scale of the question that you always hear people talk about. You know, when you're on your deathbed, do you wish that you'd spent more time at the office? It's a weighing of things that are important in life, and it's the ability to really see what's worth the struggle, right? And for you, these material things don't matter as much as the real personal connection that you had with this person who meant so much to you and who did so much for you, and who you had such joy with, like you just described. And that joy is apparent in just about every photo that I've ever seen you post of the two of you. And so I appreciate you sharing that moment, and I appreciate you sharing this story. I appreciate you being here and talking to me about this and opening up and letting people know what these years were like for you and what you hope to do to change this in the future so that people don't have to experience, nobody else has to experience what you did. Thank you very much for letting us in and for letting us hear that.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for listening to my story. It means the world to me.
Hey, kind of a different WNUT talk today, but hopefully a story that you found very interesting and maybe taught you something that you didn't know before about some of the more complicated facets of life that so many people will come in contact with before it is all said and done. So hey, thank you for joining us. Share this story with anyone that you think might be interested or get something out of it. And we'll be back next time when our topic will be, I usually never know. And today is no exception. But if you want to listen to WNUT, you can do that by going to live365.com or download the free Live 365 app and just search WNUT on either one of those platforms. We are streaming 24 hours a day, and you can also on-demand any of these shows at our YouTube channel at The Real WNUT, and we will see you next time.